We just came back from Kilimanjaro, and it was one of the great experiences in my life. It was most surely the toughest 7 days of my life, physically and spiritually. I've learned a lot. In the spirit, me and my family have been through much difficult times, and I'm very sure that God prepared my heart and my spirit for what He asked me to go and do at Kilimanjaro. So as we arrived there, me and Tinus and two of our friends, Dion and Lorette, they went because of their son that died 6 months before Aldo, and it was Dwayne's greatest heart's desire to go and climb Kilimanjaro. So they did it with us, and the mountain with all the different kinds of weathers was much worse than I've ever expected. You know, in South Africa we don't see snow. We have sun, and even when Hans Meyer, he went to Kilimanjaro, and he's a German man, and when he saw the first snow there, he wrote a letter and he said, well, I found snow in Africa. They sent him a letter back to him and said, it has to be bird droppings because there's no snow in Africa. But that was now, as you know, the highest point in Africa. When the Lord asked me to go, I knew what He was asking me about the stronghold in the spirit, but I was not prepared on the amount of altars, the amount of evil altars that were built already, and how people go up to the mountain to draw strength, and how people pray from all over to draw strength from those altars. Now you can ask me, but Retah, how's that possible? Just as you go and you pray to Yeshua, and by faith you pray and you draw strength, and He pours out His strength through you because of the vessel you are, and spirit to spirit, just exactly the same the enemy operate. It's two trading floors. It's the trading floor of God's kingdom, it's the trading floor of the evil's kingdom. So it is a very, very stronghold in Africa, the highest point. So as we were approaching that, the first day we had so much rain. I wasn't even prepared for that rain. It was pouring out of heaven. They also said that it was the first time that they had so much rain in the time that we were there. It's not their rainy season. But as the rain came through, pouring on us, it was so much mud, and it's like rivers going down, and we had to walk through that rivers. And eventually you want to complain, you want to say something, but literally later you become so wet that, you know, it doesn't matter to complain because everything is wet, your clothes is wet, everything is wet, soaking through this, and you walk through the mud. And all of a sudden, as I looked at that, I started realizing that areas of our lives, that is what Aldo calls dung. It's really dung. You walk in that and you wonder, am I going to get out of this? And you walk, and when you give that step, you go so deep, deep, deep in that. And literally only by praying, you know that only when God, who calls the rain to stop, will make this stop, and God, who calls the sun and says shine, can make this do. All of a sudden you realize all you have to do is just go on, because there's no turning back. So then we arrived that night at the camp, and we went for 7 days. We arrived at the camp, and the Sherpas weren't there yet with our tents, so we stood there in the rain, and it was really just looking at each other, knowing we're not going to complain, you're just going to get through this. And I looked at this whole thing, not only in the physical, but in the spiritual, knowing how God says to us, you know what, there's seasons, there's times, but I want you to persevere. I want you to learn from this what you can. So when the rain comes again, that you will be prepared better. When the rain comes again, then that you can start understanding how it works. This is the river, start walking this side, and many things we've learned that day. But the first night already in my tent, I had a spiritual attack where the demons came, because I'm very sure they knew who I am and they knew what I was there for. So I woke up, and as I was calling out Yeshua's name, and he was definitely helping me, and I woke up, and Tinus said to me, are you okay? Because I was out of my sleeping bag. And I realized it's the first night, and they've picked me up, and I said, let's just take communion, and let's just pray again, and sanctify the tent, and pray for the grounds. And from that day on, we start praying for the grounds, and pray as far as we went. So the altars just became more and more and more and more. And we could see how people come up to the mountain and to pray there at the altars. But anyway, so day 2, we start walking over the elephant's back, they call it. So you literally climb over the elephant's back. It's mountains up and down and up and down. It's about 10 hours walk that day. And also we came very late that night, and it was freezing cold. My husband comes from the area in our country where it is actually the coldest in our country. But even him, he came in the tent that night. He says, we won't be able to come out of this tent. I'm not sure we're going to eat tonight because it's freezing. The wind was blowing, and at one stage I was really wondering if it's not going to blow our tent over or us over. But anyway, so we went through that night, and we walked again. It was walking, warfare, walking. And the third night I had an attack again. And that night, I was so much fever that I took my clothes off, and I started praying, because I knew now they tried to attack me physically. But God was so just His favor, and when God asks you to do something, His favor will be upon you. He will help you. Doesn't matter how it affects our lives. That's what I realized in this journey. Sometimes we do get weak. Sometimes we do get tired. Sometimes we do say, I don't have any more strength. But the thing is, in the journey of climbing, we all have a mountain, of climbing this mountain, is God wants us to get to this place where we won't say, but I can do it, but Christ in me. Lord, I ask, my dependency is on you. My dependency is on you. That morning, they took our stats every morning, and the oxygen level in my blood was very low. It was 82. And I knew that, it's the fever. And I just went to the Lord. I bowed down and I said, God, I'm not going to be moved by the count. I'm going to be moved by who I am in you. And greater are you that's in me than all these altars, than all these demons, and all these people that drink at night and, smoke stuff to be able to do the mountain and to climb the mountain. So we just pushed through that. And at one stage, I looked at Ines and I said, you know what? Our journey in life helped us a lot, because endurance, you just have to endure. Some days are good days, some days are bad days, but you still have to go on. You can't stay at home because your child had an epileptic fit, or something is not good, or he had an attack. No, you have to go on and on and on and on. So the endurance for me was, I knew that God was showing me, doesn't matter how hard it is, life is not easy, because I did say in my word, in this world you will have difficulties, you will have trials, you have tribulations. He says, but be of good cheer. He says, in me you will have perfect peace. So we had to get back to this place, and that place I want to call the order of Melchizedek. That place is in the core of man, is in the heart of man. It's the neshama, where God's breath is blowing out. That is the spirit, where man's spirit and God's spirit connect. God is saying to us today, doesn't matter what mountain you are climbing, we all have our own personal Kilimanjaros. We all have our personal mountains that we do climb. But God says, if you are in me, if your core, your spirit is in me, you will be able to go up that mountain. And sometimes it's very steep, very high. So eventually, after 6 days or 5 days, we got to base camp, where we climbed up just to look at the altitude a little bit and come down. And when we slept for 2 hours, we eat, and we slept for another hours. Not that you can sleep then, but you were in your tent and they woke you up at 11 o'clock. So you get your gear together in that freezing snow. It was snowing, it was a wind blowing. Then we start climbing the mountain. Climbing the mountain for 7 hours, 15 minutes to the top. So now it's not going to do with how fit you are. Yes, you need to be fit, but it's not that. The oxygen level and the mountain sickness hit people when you start climbing from base camp up. So we were all climbing behind each other, and I start looking at Tinus, and I could see that he's suffering because his body suffered with the oxygen. And at one stage he started getting behind, and we climbed up, and they said, well, when we get to Stella Point, then it's another 45 minutes to walk up to the hill. But if you can only get there we're going to drink some hot tea. And but by then it was snowing, full-blown snowing. Tinus walked 2 steps, he stopped. 2 steps, and he stopped, just to get his breath back. And I looked at him at one stage. I said, are you going to be okay? Because I knew he had a heart attack when he was young. So the enemy started with my head, and I saw in my spirit the man that the other day they carried a man down hill, and when you carry that man downhill, I tell you, it would take 2 days to get him to down where a vehicle can pick him up. And by then, I'm not sure the condition you're going to be in, because people carry you with a stretcher down that mountain in that circumstances. So I looked at him, and his face was really swollen, and the veins were thick, and his eyes were swollen. And I said to him, are you going to be okay? I wasn't worried, are you going to make it? I was worried, are you going to be okay? And he just said to me, you go and do what you need to go and do. I'll come. And then when I walked from Stella Point, that last 45 minutes, or how far even it is, I was fine because my body was adapting good with the oxygen. But I was thinking, what if Tinus die on the mountain? What if his oxygen levels can't take it? Because that morning his was 82, and I knew it wasn't good. And I knew he was suffering. On my journey up, the Lord said to me, Retah, don't fear the one who can kill your flesh. Fear God. Fear God. And I realized, on our journeys, so many times we hold so fast onto flesh, and our 10 pence are so deep in. But this is only a journey, a temporary journey. This journey is going to end. We're going to get to the end, and then it's going to be done. We can't hold onto everything on the journey. But I just said then to God, I said, God, I just give him in your hands. I just give him in your hands. And I repented of my fears that, what if I stay alone with Aldo and the kids, and I just gave all my fears to God, and I repent of that. I said, forgive me that I fear the one who can kill the flesh. And as I walked up, I was just praying constantly, the spirit of life overrules the spirit of death in us. The spirit of life overrules the spirit of death in us. I kept on praying that. I just kept on praying that the spirit of life will overrule the spirit of death in us. And as I went up and I was at the top, I started taking my gloves off, and I didn't think it's going to, I knew it was so cold, but I didn't know in freezing snow that you can't take your gloves off. So I took my gloves off to take the communion, because I was doing communion on the ground there, and the elements on the ground to sanctify the ground. And as I was busy, I looked up, and Tinus was walking. Literally 2 steps, then he stopped. 2 steps, and he stopped. So I went to him, and I was so glad he was there. And with tears just running out of his eyes, he says, Retah, I say to God, many times in my life, I did not make the top. And God answered me, and he says, yes, I know. But those times were the times that you were depending on yourself and on your strength. He says, but you asked me today to help you, and that's why you made it to the top. And he says, but Retah, only 2 steps. And then I had to ask again. 2 steps. This is how dependent I was on God for breath, just to make it to the top, for breath. He says, I understand now. God wants us to be so dependent on him for every breath you take. You are the air I breathe, we sing. So on the top we could do communion, and we could pray, and we could take a photo. And then they just want to have you off the mountain as quick as possible. And on our way down, you think it would be better. But because of all the snow and the wet, rainy conditions and the wind, it was very slippery. So it was going skiing down, and not on dry ground, but on very slippery ground. So with a couple of falls down, we made it 4 hours down to base camp. And everyone was very, very, very tired. And we just had something to eat back, and then another 8 kilometers were waiting for us to go down. So we walked another 8 kilometers down, very slow because we were very tired. Arrived at that camp about 5, 6 o'clock that night. Very tired. Everybody just eat something small, wash, and went to bed. As we was lying in bed, we were together lying in bed in our sleeping bags in the tent. With a little light, I could see the tears running down Tinus's eyes. And he says, Retah, do you realize this mountain that we've climbed was our journey? It was our spiritual journey with Yeshua that we've climbed. So many times we got tired, but we knew in our hearts we could never stop. And you know, the moment we had at the top, with the beautiful snow around us and the sun coming up, it was so worth a while. And on our way back down, we were very quiet, and there was a very tangible meekness, humbleness, thankfulness. And I realized, without a mountain in your life, you have a choice. You can walk around the mountain for 40 years, or you can make a choice. Take your Abba Father's hand and start climbing the mountain to the top, and He will bring you down. I believe with all my heart, you and me, we all have a divine destiny up into the mountain, where God said to Moses, come up, come and meet me. Where Yeshua self went up to the mountain of transfiguration. He always went up. I believe with all my heart, your divine destiny will take you up a mountain. And I believe with all my heart, it will not necessarily be an easy climb. And some people's mountains are higher than others. I can hear people that tell me the story of Everest. I know of people who died on Everest. I know of people who died on Kilimanjaro, who lost their toes, who lost a dear friend. But this is life, and this is the climb. I want to encourage you to start climbing your mountain in life, because the longer you wait, the longer you're just going to go around the mountain. I believe that this mountain, there were certain things that me and Tinus had to prepare for. There was really things that, one thing I know we did not prepare well. We did not have the proper rain suits, because we did not think it would rain that much. Yes, we prepared for the snow, because we knew that we're going to be cold, so we did. And just because I took my gloves off on top, my fingers, I was praying all the way down. I could not hold my sticks, and I fell a couple of times because my hands were dead. I could not grip them, and I was just praying, Lord, can I just please ask you that I can keep my hands and my nose, because I was really thinking that I'm going to lose my nose and my hands, because on top I saw a man and his whole lip was open up like this, and I tell you, it looks very bad. So down, I didn't have any feeling in my hands, and that's why I struggled so much. But I prayed, and I constantly prayed, and even my toes, Lord, please let the life come back in my toes. And it was a steep journey down. And constantly I was asking, constantly I was praying, constantly I was praying against the altars in our lives, in our generations. I was constantly praying. I woke up at night praying. But as we got to the end and we got back home, we landed in Johannesburg, 2 o'clock the following night. And as we landed and we were driving back home, my fingers were still dead and our toes were still dead. And we could see my nose was red, and we could see the elements were touching us. But very quiet, I came home and I knew it was only God who saved our lives. It was only God who can bring back my life to my fingers. It's only God who can bring the life back to my toes. It's only God that saved my nose. It's only God that saved Ines' life. It's only God. It's only Him. And I look at people today and I see how you have your own Kilimanjaro. Your child is in hospital, or your child is in rebellion, or you have these different kinds of things, and I'm one of you. But I realized after climbing this mountain that it's a walk of life. It's a walk of faith. It's not always going to be easy. And I'm not going to lie to you about that. But it's so worth the while. Because all your self die. And as self died, life comes back. And this time, you know this life is not you. It's nothing that you could brought. It's all God. The choice is ours. The man that was carried down with a stretcher, as I prayed for him, I said, Lord, in the physical, it looks like these people are in control of his life. Because if they're tired, they put him down. If they don't want to walk anymore, they put him down. It looks like they are in control of his life. But Lord, I ask you to take control of his soul and his spirit. The spirit of life in you overrules the spirit of death. And I just prayed and I bound the spirit of death, and I said, Lord, I just give this man in your hands. And as I walked up and he went down, I looked back and I realized, doesn't matter what we see, that's not always truth, what you see. Faith is not what you see, it's what you hope for. And I could start praying for his family and his wife and his children and ask the Lord just to be in that situation. And in our everyday lives, we pass each other on the mountain. I realized, when I was on the top and I was wondering about Tinus, is he going to make it or not? I was thinking of me praying for that man when he went down. And I realized sometimes we go so fast up and down the mountain that we don't take time to pray for another, or to stop at another and just give a hand to another. So climbing Kilimanjaro for me was obeying God's voice. Go and sanctify the mountain, doing communion wherever I went, and prayed and repented for what I saw there. But also, it was a quite spiritual journey, and it was a tough physical journey. But it was a journey where I realized today, more than ever, it's not always going to be easy, but it's always worth the while. Because having God with you, you can do all things through Christ who strengthens you. I bless you by walking your own mountain with joy, knowing He's with you. Amen.